Hello everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to the channel. I'm here today to talk about Sadie, written by Courtney Summers. I will say right from the start, this will be a spoiler-free review, so you can watch this video without fear of being spoiled if you have not read the book already. So this will likely be a pretty quick video, so let's just dive right in. This book tells the story of Sadie, whose little sister was murdered. She believes that she knows who killed her, so she sets off to find the killer and get revenge for her sister. In the other half of the novel, we are following a radio personality by the name of West McCrae. West is tasked with putting together a podcast about Sadie and basically trying to figure out where she is and what happened to her, because in his timeline, Sadie is basically a missing person at this point. And along the way, we meet up with some of Sadie's relatives as they work with West in order to figure out where Sadie has disappeared to. So Sadie is one of the first books that I remember everyone hyping up on BookTube. Basically everyone read it and everyone loved it, virtually across the board. And so this book was championed so hard by all of the people I watch on BookTube. And because of that, I had to add it to my wish list, and finally, now, I'm getting around to it and giving it a shot. Specifically, the people that loved the book really talked about how it was made for the audiobook form. And I can understand why, because Wes McCrae's portion of the book is written in podcast style. He's actually creating a podcast called The Girls, which I just read, apparently you can actually go to like Apple Podcasts and listen to The Girls as a podcast if you want, instead of just like reading the book, which is really weird and interesting. But it's very clear that Summers took inspiration from the podcast Serial, or a number of the other true crime podcasts out there, but Serial is kind of the biggest one, which, side note, season 1 of Serial is without a doubt the greatest podcast ever produced. And so if you've not listened to it, you definitely owe it to yourself. So give that a listen if you haven't. The other half of the book is written from Sadie's perspective as she's trying to track down who she believes is the killer and then get her revenge. I can see why Sadie is so highly regarded. It touches on some very taboo topics like pedophilia, sexual abuse, addiction, things like that. And it does this in a very serious way, giving a proper weight to these subjects. That said, for me, everything just felt a little too paint by numbers, a little too predictable. Summers doesn't really try to do anything unique with the material. We are reading about an evil person being tracked by a troubled young girl. And there are really no shades of gray, which, to me, characters really come alive and are most interesting when we're dealing in those areas, those gray areas. And I know what you're saying if you've read this book and loved it. There are moments where these characters are built out a little bit more, and Summers attempts to make them a bit more three-dimensional, but it all feels so superficial. None of it feels genuine. None of it feels important. It's almost as if Summers is checking off a box. These moments feel like they exist for no other reason than for someone to point to and say, oh, no, see, this person is not black and white. They did X, Y, or Z, but they feel false and they just didn't work for me at all. Yes, I hated the villain. And though I didn't like Sadie by any stretch, I wanted to see her get her revenge, because anyone who does the things that this antagonist does deserves the absolute worst things imaginable to happen to them. But that's not a nod to the author. That's not a credit to the characters. That's simply a basic human characteristic that I feel like any decent human being would feel the same way. Bad things should happen to bad people. That's just the way it is. If you've been watching this channel for any period of time, you know that what I love most about books are the characters and how the author builds these characters to make us care about them. And Sadie it doesn't measure up in this category. And because of that, the whole book just feels lifeless. While I enjoyed the podcast style or the podcast elements to this book, it doesn't feel legitimate or genuine when you compare it to actual true crime podcasts like Serial or Criminal or Atlanta Monster, which are all 3 podcasts I recommend, by the way. But as someone who has spent a great deal of time listening to these podcasts, the moments that Summers writes in are not moments that you would ever see in something like this. They are novel moments. They are not podcast moments. And that really makes the whole thing feel inauthentic, which in turn kills half of the novel for me. On top of that, the acting in the audiobook, which does have a full cast, is not great. The main characters, they do a great job. Specifically Sadie, Wes McCrae, and there's a character, Sadie's like surrogate grandmother. They do really well. But these smaller characters or these other characters, they are incredibly hit or miss for me. Some of this comes down to the writing, because once you start doing a podcast style, you're writing a script. You're not writing a novel. And I don't feel like Summers really grasped the difference between the two, which hurt it for me. But the rest of it is really on the actors themselves. I thought, while they were good, there were just some moments that felt false, for lack of a better word. I didn't believe them. I will say I was never bored reading Sadie, but I had a good idea of where this whole thing was going, and it really did nothing to surprise me along the way. Sadie is a book that is loved by virtually everyone that reads it. So if you do give it a shot, I genuinely hope that you enjoy it more than I did. For me, though, it just felt forced. It felt false. And because of that, I just didn't love it as much as I hoped I would. I expected there to be a lot more depth and a lot more dimension than what's presented here. So because of that, I give Sadie by Courtney Summers 2 out of 5 stars. All right, so that's going to do it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, please consider subscribing for more. If not, thank you anyway for watching. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read this book. What did you think of it? But for the sake of those that have not yet read it, please keep all of your comments spoiler free. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.